So I need to respond to a volley of exchanges that I've been having about the role of science and the role that science does play or should play within human life. The last thing I want to be accused of is being suggesting that I'm against science or not for a full-on recognition that science has been underappreciated, or perhaps that too many people have clinged to dogmatic fantasies and relics rather than really accepting the difficulty of bringing oneself into alignment with modern science. I don't think, though, that that means that one has to, and I do see what I would call a kind of religiosity here. I don't think that that means one has to fly a flag and grab one's heart and think of, oh, the great periodic chart of the elements. There's something very suspicious about the way people assume that if you're not full on board with making all of life over in the image of science and imagining that everything will somehow become available to scientific method, then somehow you're anti-science. This person has, and I've seen other people, they have what I would call the one-eyed mania of an ideologue. They see everything through this lens of science. Like science has to be the lens. What could be more dangerous than a person who can't appreciate life's ambiguity more than that? Should science be brought into more domains? Yes. Is science grossly misunderstood, misappreciated, in lots of ways misapplied, as it's aped in what are called the social sciences? Yes. I don't think, though, that this means that what we really need to do is bring all these people in line with a better and more rigorous understanding of the scientific methodology, because thereby it will be brought to all aspects of life. That's ridiculous. If a person can't see that as blatantly absurd, they should really ask themselves if they're practicing a religion or if they're trying to understand the world. The world itself is diverse. The world has variety, and part of what that means is that things like art and morality and history are never and will never be subject to the same understandings that we can have in science. Science cannot deal with what is not repeatable and what is not in some way regular enough to be a pattern. Science doesn't even hold anything to be true. It works with falsification, and by falsifying, it is to make predictions that work for a while. That doesn't mean, though, that any of the predictions that they had were true, and it certainly doesn't mean that people should try to reduce all of their lives to those aspects that are regular, those aspects that are predictable. There are once occurrent events in history. They're called why certain people made the frickin' art that they did. And when they made that art, I don't think we're going to come up with a scientific formula for that. Maybe we will. I remember when E.O. Wilson, I think many people do, when E.O. Wilson was the Nobel Prize winner, right, who was there trying to implement the science program in public, and he suggested that what we needed to do was pass out mass IQ tests, and people who got below a certain level on the IQ test, what we should do is offer cash incentives and tax breaks if those people would just voluntarily sterilize themselves. Well, you can imagine what happened when he made these claims. Now, do I think the problem is that too many people are unwilling to be scientific enough to put into science or to put into their life what science would teach them? I think that's a very interesting question. I think I am pretty frightened of the idea that there's going to be a social program by which people are going to become regimented into the social benefits that science, with a one-eyed monster, is going to provide. I don't think that all of the criteria by which judgments are made about this stuff is going to come down to something that has been scientifically warranted. Most of the beliefs that are lurking in when people assent to a claim or when they don't aren't always given by scientific evidence. I really don't know how to say this, and the thing that really gets under my skin, if it's not apparent that I'm a little irritated, is that people act as if unless you're willing to get on some kind of one-eyed maniacal program of let's make everything over in the image of science because that's all I understand. It sounds like a very frightened person who doesn't really want to admit human vulnerability, but it sounds like unless you're engaged with let's make everything over in the image of a mathematical science, then you're anti-science. You're just outdated. You're irrelevant. You're not hip with it. You know what that is? That's a fearful person. There are people who have a vested interest, and look around for them. I want everyone. You look around in your life. There are tons of people who are going to tell you that the conditions are new and modern and everything is different, and oh boy, science this is so different than it used to be. All of that is true, but listen to the motive that there is for people to think that way. What they're doing is trying to give themselves a prerogative to ignore history. Yes, many people like the cult of the new, the cult of the everything is important that's only come since my birth, because what that does is it helps them stave off the fear that it's much more complicated than that.